Breaking news, a step closer to justice as police arrest an 18-year-old in connection with the murder of a T-Mobile worker. What we're learning about him as the victim's family holds a vigil.
He didn't got the dream that he wanted, but we're going to make it happen.
That's why we have to fight!
Parents and teachers rally to improve their kids' education. The lines being drawn over taxpayer funding.
We deserve better than a bare minimum budget.
Serious charges brought against 2 Baltimore City officers.
We're starting to catch up with the officers that need to be held accountable.
What they're accused of, 2 grieving families forever altered by city violence.
Parents like myself, we deserve justice.
We make their voices heard as they demand action from Baltimore leadership.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
3 developing stories as we come on the air tonight. Police make an arrest in the deadly Canton T-Mobile shooting that claimed the life of a 23-year-old. New developments as the victim's family holds a vigil.
Plus, the city's crime continues. Reports of a 15-year-old shot in one incident and 2 others at another scene fighting for their lives.
And continuing coverage on the crisis in the classroom, a battle over school funding in Harford County as residents protest budget cuts to schools. We have all bases covered.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. We begin with the news of the arrest in the Canton T-Mobile shooting. It came as a vigil was getting underway.
Let's go right to Keith Daniels with breaking developments on the suspect now in custody. Keith?
Well, Mary and Kai, the suspect is 18-year-old Arthur McCayton. News of that arrest coming here as they were gathering here for the vigil for Fabian Sanchez Gonzalez. Family and friends here for the vigil. Then they learned about the arrest. Again, he's 18 years old, Arthur McCayton. We have found out much more information about that particular suspect. We'll have more on that suspect and more on the vigil here just ahead. Reporting live now in Canton, Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
All right, Keith, thank you. Go to foxbaltimore.com to see our coverage of a blistering report on the Department of Juvenile Services just out 10 days ago, as well as the new Secretary Vincent Schiraldi, who at one time said that no criminal should be exposed to the adult system until they turn 21 or 25 years of age. Well, more gun violence tonight in Baltimore City. At least 3 people shot at 2 different crime scenes. At 4:30, a 15-year-old was hit in the thigh along Mount Holly Street. Officers tell Fox 45 News he is expected to survive. However, it's more grim along West Lafayette, where a man and a woman were shot. This is the scene in Upton, where we have been told BPD homicide detectives are now taking over the case due to the extent of the victim's injuries. There is no suspect information to pass along right now, but we will update you as that information comes into our newsroom.
Education is a right! That's why we have to fight!
Harford County residents are pushing back on the proposed budget. Those against it say it doesn't fully meet the public school system's funding request. It's the latest battle between citizens and their local government over education funding. Fox 45's Jeff Abel joins us live right now with the latest from tonight's contentious budget hearing in Bel Air. Jeff.
Well, educators in Harford County say they have never before been saddled with such a dire budget decrease until now.
It's a few minutes after the end of school, and in Bel Air, teachers are turning a public parking lot into a classroom.
This is not good enough.
They're turning up the volume on a lesson they want county leaders to hear.
Schools need teachers!
A $19 million cut in Harford County's education budget, they insist, will cripple the classrooms.
I'm afraid that we're going to have to do the worst thing possible, which is lay people off.
Educators had asked the county for a $19 million increase in funding, but the county executive's proposed budget came with a $19 million decrease.
Administrators are here!
And there's way too much money going into the central office where most folks are still working remotely and not into the classroom.
Let's merge!
Today, teachers, students, and parents marched to the county administration building demanding more funding, not less.
Schools need the money! That's Bob talk!
Teachers are working 10, 12 hours a day, tutoring, trying to get these kids on track again, and we need to keep them on that path.
Schools need need teachers! Schools need bus!
Among those rallying today was Janine Canigo.
They're trying to shut me up.
That is why we have to fight!
I can scream too!
She supports the county executive's trimming of the budget.
Our superintendent gave himself a $71,000 pay increase.
At a public hearing tonight, the county leaders got an earful.
I urge you to send Mr. Casserly and his team back to the drawing board to produce a budget that actually meets the needs of this county.
I think he's got a great budget. I think things are going to be funded that need to be funded.
A decision is still weeks away, but for now, a lesson in finance is still on.
One of the county executive's priorities was to deliver a proposed budget that did not contain a tax increase. This one does not. We're live. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thank you. Now, earlier today, Howard County leaders acknowledged the blueprint for education funding will be difficult to pay. In fact, County Executive Calvin Ball is proposing a $47 million increase to the school system. That would bring the budget for schools to more than $1.1 billion. Ball says despite the high price tag, there are no tax increases to general taxes this year.
It is challenging to meet the goals of the blueprint. However, I think that those aspirational goals are things that we all should be continuing to talk about.
Now in Baltimore City, Mayor Brandon Scott says an unexpected spike in required Kerwin Commission funding was a gut punch, in the mayor's words, when he learned the formula called for $79 million more than expected. Again, our top story tonight, the arrest of a young man in the murder of a phone store employee in Canton.
Let's go back to Keith Daniels live on the scene. Keith?
Well, Mary and Kai, that suspect again is 18-year-old Arthur McCaton. And according to our sources close to the investigation, he's a young suspect already under the supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services. And tonight, he's accused of that murder that happened here at this cell phone store. Family and friends with candles.
You probably didn't even know him. He didn't even know you. But yet, he could leave an impact on you.
To remember 23-year-old Fabian Sanchez Gonzalez, a gathering outside the T-Mobile store where Gonzalez was gunned down inside while working. Bowed heads and tears, his parents and brothers are here.
He was a kind-hearted spirit. I know he probably touched many hearts here, one way or another, through a joke, probably cracked a smile.
So are coworkers and friends for Fabian.
Humble, kind-hearted, you know, a loving guy who worked extra hours, come in early, the type of person that didn't deserve to, you know, the detriment to what happened.
But as the vigil goes on with heavy hearts and colorful balloons, late news of an arrest in the deadly shooting provides some comfort. Fabian's brother,
it's so confused, it's
overwhelmed.
And the tears of joy and pain, but we're glad. I'm glad to hear that there is a suspect and there's been an arrest made, because that's what we want. We want justice.
Police say they arrested and charged 18-year-old Arthur McCaden today in connection with Fabian's fatal shooting Sunday. Sources familiar with McCaden's criminal record say he was under the Department of Juvenile Services supervision. Also, his father convicted in February for murder. Now, another young person accused of killing yet another young person behind bars tonight.
That's all we want. Justice for my brother. Justice for every innocent soul that has been taken from our hearts. Not just my heart, my family's, but every other family members out there.
He was just awesome. And then the biggest thing, he was a family man. And even though his light may have went dim today, he birthed so many different lights with his smile and with his personality.
Well, that vigil wrapping up just moments ago. Meantime, police initially reported that 2 suspects were involved in this deadly shooting. Tonight, they say this investigation is ongoing. We're live now in Canton. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
You know, as a defense attorney, I didn't stand for this behavior. And I certainly will not stand for this behavior as the Baltimore City State's attorney.
2 Baltimore officers now facing criminal charges. The first officer, C. Watson, is accused of selling drugs while on the job in Baltimore County. Watson was under surveillance from both BPD and county police when he was caught leaving his post to sell the drugs at a tattoo shop, according to prosecutors. And the second officer indicted, Alexis Acosta, is now facing manslaughter and other reckless driving charges related to this fatal crash in East Baltimore last June. Acosta was responding to a call when he hit and killed 58-year-old Terry Harrell, who was riding a scooter. The city approved a $400,000 settlement to Harrell's family earlier this year. And this announcement marks 6 Baltimore City police officers now indicted on criminal charges this year. The cases are all separate and unrelated. City State's Attorney Ivan Bates questioned today if this is a concerning pattern.
Well, I wouldn't say I see a pattern. What I see is our office holding officers accountable, and that we're doing that with individuals who are breaking the law. But what I can tell you I have seen is the consent decree, I do believe, is working. I do believe, having been a defense attorney and seen some of the police actions before, what I'm seeing now is that we're starting to catch up with the officers that need to be held accountable.
The police department is struggling with a severe staffing shortage. While the Baltimore City Police Department has acknowledged its ranks have plummeted to record lows, we're learning the situation may be worse than previously thought. Rebecca Pryor has details.
There's no debating Baltimore City is grappling with a worsening officer shortage. But when you compare just how many officers BPD says they're down to how many the police union says they're down, the numbers not adding up. Circling back to a 2020 consent decree hearing, a federal judge calling BPD staffing levels critical, saying, quote, the court is alarmed and pulling the fire alarm. The judge specifying BPD needs at least 2,800 officers to be fully staffed. At the time, the department had about 2,500. Flash forward to today, the department dwindling to just 2,100 officers, 700 officers short of what's recommended, and 200 more than what BPD is claiming. In a statement to Fox 45, Police Union President Mike Mancuso accusing BPD of deceiving the public, writing, that is not the number of officers needed to police Baltimore. This brings us to the very ineffective and lowball attempt by the city to recruit new officers.
I don't think that to downplay the numbers is a desire not to hire.
But according to law enforcement expert and former FBI agent Tyrone Powers, there's a reason BPD may be skewing the stats.
First of all, you don't want the public to have anxiety and fears. Secondly, you don't want the criminal element who may be looking at those numbers to feel like there are more opportunities.
Regardless of the exact number, BPD is still significantly understaffed at a time crime is projected to climb. Ahead of the anticipated summer crime surge, Mancuso writes, quote, we are going into the summer months and our officers are already exhausted due to canceled days off and forced daily overtime. Tired employees in any business tend to make mistakes. Any negative events that occur should be placed squarely on the shoulders of Mayor Scott and Police Commissioner Harrison. Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Former Baltimore Deputy Police Commissioner Jason Johnson believes with the current shortage of uniformed patrol officers, the city's crime crisis could get worse. Taking information from the union that 600 officers are assigned to the 9 patrol districts in the city, he described only 10 to 14 officers per district could be on patrol per shift.
And that brings us to our question of the day. Do you think public safety is at risk because of the condition of the Baltimore Police Department? You can vote right now at foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Well, we've got some cool weather on the way for tonight. Got down to 40 last night, and we're well on our way through the 50s and upper 40s. No rain on the map, but you're going to get down to 44 in Baltimore overnight. And 43 at Columbia, 42 at Westminster. I'm going to let you know when we could see some 80s around here. Yes, it's in my Weather Authority forecast.
Next on Fox 45 News at 10, questions surrounding the hiring practice at Safe Streets sites. From what prior crimes are acceptable to who approves hires. The answers we're getting tonight. Two families share their fight for justice after losing their loved ones to Baltimore's violence. We make their voices heard. And at 10:45, Maryland's most wanted. A woman's call for help on the side of a road is a trap. What you need to know so you don't fall victim. Plus, a major break in a case of a man from Maryland wanted for murder in Georgia.
Fox 45 News continues to investigate the Safe Streets program, trying to find out how involved the city is when it comes to implementing the gun violence prevention program.
Mackenzie Frost outlines new questions being raised about hiring Safe Streets workers.
We're back at the accountability desk, and let's take a look at the contracts between the city and the community-based organizations implementing the Safe Streets program. Remember, we had to threaten to sue the city for them to turn over these contracts in the first place. And it's interesting. Let's take a look at what the city requires of these CBOs when it comes to information that they need. Here's the contract with Catholic Charities for the Sandtown and Brooklyn Safe Streets locations. In this page of the contract, it talks about what the city must approve before anything is published. Advertising, publicity, anything must be pre-approved by the city in writing. And here under the reporting clause of the contract, Catholic Charities must provide the city with any draft copies of a report before publishing. And then the city can tell Catholic Charities to make any changes. And here's where it gets interesting, because also in the contract there's a criminal background check clause requiring Catholic Charities to perform criminal background checks on any employee before the work begins. There is no language requiring Catholic Charities to turn over the findings of those background checks to the city, though. Just this week, we spoke with a family who's calling for a stronger screening process when it comes to Safe Streets workers. Their calls come after their loved one was shot and killed in 2019.
They need to screen these guys. They need to screen them for their contacts, what type of contacts they have now. You know, are they still dealing with the same people that they were dealing with before?
Scrap it, start over.
Scrap it and start it over with a new layout and just a better way of a new recruitment system.
The suspect who was accused of the murder was a Safe Streets worker at the time of the shooting. Less than 2 weeks later, he was fired, and after multiple trials, the suspect was found not guilty during the final trial in March of this year. That story prompted us to ask the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, or MONSE, what their involvement is in the screening process for Safe Streets workers. A spokesperson for Director Jackson told us a few things, including MONSE provides strategic oversight and technical assistance to partner organizations who administer sites and employ the workforce. So that had us wondering if the city requires these nonprofits to get approval before publishing an advertisement for an event, but they're not involved in the hiring process for Safe Streets workers? So we sent Director Jackson a few more questions, asking, are those background checks provided to the city before someone is hired? If not, why? And if background checks are provided to the city before someone is hired as a Safe Streets worker, is it fair to say MONSE really isn't involved in the hiring process? We'll let you know if we get any answers from MONSE about these questions. Meanwhile, the city agency posting this flyer on their social media pages advertising a Safe Streets hiring event. At the Accountability Desk, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, we do have some additional information. In a statement to Fox 45 News, MONSE says the hiring process consists of a panel of people, including MONSE, the Baltimore Police Department, members of the surrounding community, and the community organization operating the Safe Streets site, adding, quote, site administrator partners are responsible for the hiring and screening of potential employees with technical assistance from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement.
Families who lost a loved one to crime are demanding justice, hearing their calls for action from local leaders on public safety.
Congressional Republicans issuing a subpoena to the FBI. I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington with more on the memo they want to see and why some argue it could implicate the president.
And after having a dress for days for gloomy and cool weather, finally what you're going to need for tomorrow? Sunglasses. Yes, we may need those morning jackets and long pants, but by afternoon, short sleeves, sunglasses, a little partial sun, high temperatures getting well into the 60s. Still not necessarily no chance of rain tomorrow. I'm going to be tracking it on the future scan. Stick around. That's in my Weather Authority forecast.
Congressional GOP leaders say they believe the FBI has evidence that implicates President Joe Biden in a bribery scheme. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the latest.
Congressional Republicans say they've learned a document exists detailing an alleged criminal scheme involving then Vice President Biden, and they want the FBI to hand it over.
We need to know what the truth is, and we need to get it right now.
Senator Chuck Grassley and Representative James Comer sending a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland and FBI Director Christopher Wray asking for this document, saying they learned of its existence from a, quote, highly credible source.
At this time, the FBI needs to explain whether it's accurate or not.
According to the letter, the whistleblower says the FBI memo describes an alleged scheme relating to the exchange of money from a foreign nation to Joe Biden for policy decisions he would have influenced as vice president. The memo spurring rumblings of impeachment talk by some Republicans, even though they haven't seen the document yet.
The Constitution specifies that impeachment lies for treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors. Bribery is explicitly noted in the Constitution. The evidence against Joe Biden being complicit and profiting from this corruption is growing and growing.
White House spokesperson Ian Sams calling these unfounded, politically motivated attacks from Republicans, arguing there's no evidence to back up the claims.
You hate to see these things to be politicized. The concern or the problem from my perspective is this stuff should have been investigated by Congress years ago. Let the American people know what is the flow of money that's gone to the Biden family, some tens of millions of dollars from China. They really haven't disputed that.
This comes as federal investigators are close to coming to a decision on whether or not to charge Hunter Biden with tax and gun-related violations, the result of a years-long investigation into the president's son. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Robbing my son for what? Money? Come on now. You shot him in the back of his head for money?
Families who lost loved ones to violence are voicing their frustration with continued violent crime. We hear a mother's plea for justice as we look into the city's clearance rates.
Police say a group of teens pointed a gun at a middle school student's head and pulled the trigger. The calls for accountability.
We're following the crime crisis in Baltimore and, in fact, across the state of Maryland. Families who lost loved ones to violence in the city are speaking out, demanding Baltimore leaders do more to stop the bloodshed.
At the same time, 3 teens in masks rush onto a bus to try to kill a Prince George's County student. The shocking pictures as we take a closer look at youth violence across the nation. We're starting in the city, though. While there's an arrest in the murder of Fabian Sanchez Gonzalez, dozens of cases remain open.
Fox 45's Vincent Hill has more on families seeking closure and where that clearance rate stands tonight. Vince?
Yeah, Kai and Mary, as it stands right now, over half of Baltimore City's homicides are unsolved, and a homicide investigator says that number should be much higher. 2 Baltimore City mothers dealing with the same pain, the loss of their sons.
I was at work, and I got a phone call from the detective telling me that they need to talk to me.
Liza Holly's son, Darrell Hudson, was stabbed to death on Bel Air Road in June of 2021. Anita Thomas lost her son, Dante Belcher, to gun violence in April of 2020.
Robbing my son for what? Money? Come on now. You shot him in the back of his head for money?
For these 2 mothers, a sense of justice. Liza Holly's son's killer behind bars.
And they told me that the suspect was in custody.
While Anita Thomas learned her son's killer's fate last week.
I just prayed that they throw him under the bus, and they did. They gave him life without parole.
But for so many other families, justice seems so far away. Thiru Vignaraja represented both families.
Baltimore's had 300+ murders the last 8 years. They solved by arrest less than a quarter of them.
Fox 45 looked into Baltimore City's homicide closure rate. According to BPD, the closure rate for 2023 is 40% based on uniform crime reporting. Factoring in the 89 homicides for the year, that means more than 50 are unsolved.
There's nothing worse than a killer running on the street.
Dave Walker is a retired homicide investigator. He says a 40% closure rate is below average.
I would say the average that we worked at when I was working is 60%.
Walker says in order for Baltimore residents to feel safe, Baltimore police need to solve more cases.
If you want to live with killers, then 40% is good. But if you want to live in a society where you can feel free to go to the convenience store or go to school, 95% is what you're shooting for.
Now, BPD actually tells me their clearance rate is more like 53.9% because that includes 10 open warrants for murders on the books where the suspect has not yet been caught. For now, we're live at Baltimore Police Headquarters. Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Vincent, thank you. Well, it's not just families. Business owners are fed up with the crime crisis. One woman telling Fox 45 News she's closing down the store she has run for more than 40 years for her own safety. Jody Rossoff says her store was robbed at gunpoint twice in just 6 months. This is the video from one of the incidents. A man posing as a customer walks behind the counter, pulls out a weapon and demands money. Rossoff was able to get her own gun and shoot the attacker. He was arrested, but even after successfully defending herself, Rossoff says running a business has become too much of a risk.
We have been here in the city for 44 years. For 44 years, we have paid property taxes, we have paid retail sales taxes, we have employed people. Shame on the mayor, shame on, the judges and the prosecutors and our former state's attorney for letting this happen to Baltimore City.
Jody made it out of the experience with non-life-threatening injuries, including a gash on her head that required 4 stitches.
Unbelievable still images. Police say 3 masked teens tried to kill a 14-year-old on a Prince George's County school bus yesterday. Now, according to police, the suspects ran on the bus and pointed a gun at the victim's head, but apparently the gun wouldn't fire. When the gun failed, witnesses say the suspects began beating the target before they ran away. Now, the head of the bus drivers union says he's shocked to see this kind of violence among children.
This particular incident is part of a bigger problem, and that is safety for all of our staff, for our students.
Well, officers later found 3 live bullets on the floor of the bus. The investigation continues.
Today, concerns over student safety continued in Prince George's County as a loaded gun is confiscated from a student at Golson Middle School in Landover. Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks today saying the attack is horrifying and violence among young people is unacceptable.
And when these young people are apprehended, let me just say it, they must be held accountable. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They must be held accountable.
And juvenile crime, not just a Maryland issue. Tonight, national correspondent Angela Brown is taking a closer look at the surge in youth violence across the nation.
Data from the DOJ points to some youth crimes involving homicides are up, but reality is far more complicated. Youth crime declining for decades. The pandemic hit, a slight bump up in some categories, sparking new legislation and a fierce debate about how to save America's youth. Disturbing viral video capturing unruly teens acting out. Young people Tyreek Glasgow is trying to get off the streets.
I opened up our own community center where we provided free food programs, a library.
Tyreek runs Young Chances Foundation in Philly, where for some young teens, homicide is normalized.
That their friends want to die, that there's not going to be any resources in schools. There's no, what's the purpose of graduating?
The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention found homicides committed by juveniles acting alone jumped 30% in 2020. But in 2007, that number was higher and nearly triple in the 90s. Murders involving multiple juvenile offenders increased 65% in 2020 after years of decline. Ria Saha Shah works with juveniles in the justice system.
The fear is that lawmakers will think that they need to act more swiftly to be harsher on young people.
Louisiana state lawmakers are considering a bill sending 17-year-olds to adult prison. Maryland state Republicans proposing a bill allowing children as young as 10 to be charged with gun crimes. The Juvenile Law Center argues for other solutions.
Accessible health care, accessible education, community services, after school programs.
Last August, the DOJ releasing this report estimating overall youth arrests for violent crimes, including murder, robbery, and aggravated assault, continues to decline in 2020 and was down 78% from its peak in 1994. But for many teens, quality of life not improving.
They walk into their school and they can't get a meal, or they feel threatened. That's the quality of life where it needs to be highlighted every day, not when they do flash mobs at the end of spring break.
In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
A video of a California high schooler confronting her school board is going viral. The student Megan from Riverside, which is just outside of Los Angeles, was addressing a recent fight between two classmates. Now, she says of the students, one of the students is transgender and was allowed to use the girls' restrooms. Megan claims that put student safety at risk and led to the fight.
Why don't we ever get a say in whether or not we are comfortable with this? The truth is, we aren't. The majority of us aren't, and yet nothing has been done to protect the safety of these women.
Well, the district released a statement saying the student was expelled after the fight, but there was no information provided from the expelled student. A spokesperson told Sinclair Broadcast Group the district would not be commenting further due to student privacy rights. Taking a look right now at the Fox box on the top left, 3 patients from yesterday's deadly mass shooting in Atlanta are still in the ICU, 2 of them in critical condition. The 4th surviving victim is stable, while a 5th victim was killed. The suspected shooter, 24-year-old Dion Patterson, has been charged with murder.
On the top right, embattled St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner will resign. The Missouri city's first black prosecutor and a progressive has faced calls to step down amid the city's crime crisis. Numerous arrests of prior offenders drew criticism from many that she was not tough on crime. Republican Attorney General Andrew Bailey was taking steps to remove her already. Gardner will step down June 1st.
On the bottom left, former President Trump says he'll probably attend an ongoing civil trial in New York, where writer E. Jean Carroll is accusing him of rape and defamation. He's calling the trial a political attack built on false claims, The former president's defense team is not calling any witnesses.
And on the bottom right, companies developing artificial intelligence meeting with Vice President Harris at the White House. The goal is to figure out guardrails for the powerful technology as experts flag concerns over privacy and misinformation. Be the first to know about breaking news by signing up for News on the Go. Go to FOX45.com, click on Mobile Alert, sign up under the Station tab. You can also download the Fox 45 app for your smartphone. Just search WBFF in your app store.
Tomorrow, Baltimore's entire metro system is shutting down. That closure will impact the entire subway for maintenance. The main change, an updated computer system that officials say will allow for safer and more reliable transit throughout the city. Now, it will remain open for the Monday morning commute, if you're interested.
When a vacant home in Baltimore went up in flames this morning, firefighters knew how to approach the problem thanks to a program some say is saving lives. This was the aftermath of the fire in North Baltimore. It took hours to put out the flames. You can see just how much damage fire caused to the abandoned building. The president of a local fire union says the firefighters on the scene were able, to safely respond thanks to the Code X-ray program. For months, local fire departments have been marking vacant homes with warning signs, letting first responders know if they're at high risk of collapsing. While warning signs can be helpful to protect firefighters, they are not a permanent solution to the problem.
Until the city comes up with the money to knock these buildings down, they're always going to be a problem.
According to the city dashboard, there are over 14,000 vacant buildings in Baltimore. A month-long chase from Georgia to south central Pennsylvania finally comes to an end. The role the public played in catching one of Maryland's most wanted